Hey everyone, and welcome back to this explainer from the Foundry by Forge College. So last time around, we conquered ERC 1155 minting mechanics. Today, we're shifting gears and focusing on designing the ultimate blueprint for connecting Web 2 to Solana. We are really getting into the actual architecture today. We're going to figure out exactly how to map a standard web request over to the blockchain, and more importantly, how to do it without causing absolute fiery chaos on your servers. Because let's face it, absolutely nobody likes a server meltdown.
For this explainer, we are basically acting as structural engineers. We'll be sketching out the precise schematic for how a user's intent becomes a perfectly validated Solana transaction. We're going to cover bridging Web 2 in Solana, validating those payloads, building out our transaction skeletons, locking down our failsafes and idempotency, and finally deciding between sync versus async flow. All right, let's lay our foundation and jump straight into Section 1, bridging Web 2 and Solana, and defining our strict API contract. Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to think of an action endpoint as a highly strict bouncer at an incredibly exclusive club. Its entire job is to translate a Web 2 JSON payload directly into a format that Solana understands. But crucially, it does this without actually submitting it to the network just yet. It is the literal boundary line between the wild, totally unpredictable world of user clicks and the highly organized, deterministic world of the blockchain. It receives the intent, checks the ID, and simply prepares it for entry.
That setup perfectly leads us into Section 2, validating the payload. This is our quality control at the gate. You know, you'd never just let uninspected raw materials onto a construction site, right? Well, it's the exact same concept here. By using validation tools like Zod or Joy, you can think of them as your strict quality assurance inspectors. We enforce our rules right at the perimeter. We need to make sure token amounts are actually positive integers, because trust me, absolutely no one wants an accidental negative mint where you somehow end up owing the blockchain a digital monkey. We also verify that the recipients are using valid base 58 formats, which is Solana's native language, before doing any heavy lifting. Catching a malformed input right here saves us from some massive simulation or signing headaches down the line. Moving on to Section 3, building transaction skeletons. This is exactly where we start mapping our freshly validated data over to the blockchain. Once the payload passes our strict quality control, we build out the transaction skeleton. It's essentially the wiring diagram for our entire operation. And just look at how explicit this is. The payload's amount field is translated directly into the specific, serialized machine code that the blockchain expects. The recipient maps to an accounts array with very specific read and write permissions, and our metadata handles all the deduplication routing. We are literally taking abstract, human-readable code and transforming it into concrete blockchain parameters.
Building a transaction skeleton is honestly a lot like playing a really high-stakes game of Mad Libs. The endpoint defines the nouns for us, the specific instructions, the accounts involved, the actual amount of tokens, but it deliberately leaves blanks for the heavy lifting. Notice that it does not fill in the latest blockhash, and it definitely does not attach the final signatures. It just builds the overall shape of the sentence, packages it all up neatly, and waits for another service to read it.
So, the whole concept here is summarized perfectly by this golden rule. Keep your endpoint stateless where possible. Think of your endpoint as a waiter taking your order, not the chef in the kitchen cooking the meal. Separating these responsibilities prevents a massive bottleneck. If your endpoint is busy trying to fetch block hashes and sign things, it's going to get bogged down fast. By handing off that skeleton to a dedicated submission service, your API stays lightning fast, highly modular, and way easier to scale. Which brings us to Section 4. Failsafes and idempotency keys, because, well, we really need to protect ourselves against the dreaded double mint disaster. Seriously, what happens if a user gets a little impatient? We've all been there, right? The network gets congested, the loading spinner is just mocking us, and the user mashes the mint button like it's a broken elevator button. If we aren't careful, they just accidentally bought 3 NFTs instead of the one they wanted. That is where idempotency comes in. It's our structural failsafe against human impatience. It guarantees that no matter how many times a user rage clicks that submit button, the on-chain action only ever happens exactly once. Every repeated request just produces a safe, totally predictable outcome. I like to think of this as the coat check ticket strategy. When you pass an idempotency key, which is usually just a unique UUID, in the API header, it basically acts exactly like a coat check ticket. The API takes that ticket and maps it directly to a single canonical transaction. If you try to present that exact same ticket a second or third time, the system essentially says, hey, I already have a record for this ticket, just wait a second. It stops duplicate network submissions totally dead in their tracks. It's just a remarkably simple, yet incredibly powerful design pattern. All right, on to our final section, Section 5, sync versus async flow. This is all about how we direct the traffic on our API. So, now that our failsafes are locked in, we have to direct the traffic. Do we go synchronous or asynchronous? Synchronous endpoints hold the connection completely open, attempt the submission, and literally just wait around for on-chain confirmation. Now, that's great for immediate finality, but it is terrible for your server if the network gets slow. Asynchronous endpoints, on the other hand, are incredibly responsive. They validate the input, toss our transaction skeleton into a queue, and immediately hand the user back a tracking ID so they can check the status later. For a user-facing Web3 app dealing with crazy swings in network congestion, going async is vastly superior for absorbing that latency. Of course, in a robust async flow, we definitely don't just throw the transaction into the void and cross our fingers. We track it through some very specific lifecycle states: accepted, queued, submitted, confirmed, or failed. And by utilizing our trusty idempotency key, we can actually trace a single user click all the way through our backend queuing systems, right down to the final on-chain confirmation. This allows us to provide the front-end UI with super precise status updates the entire time. As you can see, designing these systems means balancing a lot of tricky trade-offs. If you want to dive deeper into these enterprise-grade operational choices and really master how to build scalable Web3 infrastructure, the advanced learning programs and developer community at Forge College are just an incredible resource to help you level up your skills. So, we've successfully engineered this airtight action endpoint blueprint together. We've validated the data, we've mapped it to a stateless skeleton, and we've protected the whole thing with idempotency. But it leaves us with one massive, exciting question for our next explainer. Now that we have this perfect skeleton just sitting in a queue, how exactly do we serialize it, attach the block hash, sign it, and finally submit it to the Solana network? Well, we'll actually be covering all of those network submission mechanics in the next module of this course. To find the answer to that and to explore way more deeply into RESTful API development on Solana and other Web3 topics, make sure to visit forge.college to check out the full curriculum. Thank you guys so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep building, and I will see you in the next one.